Caribbean stories to the world. Welcome to the Style and Vibes podcast with me, Michaela. I'll be giving you the inside scoop on music, fashion, culture, and more from Caribbean celebrities and tastemakers across the globe, pushing our culture with authenticity and, of course, style and vibes. Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the latest episode. Today I am talking to award-winning journalist Melissa Noel. She is a Guyanese-American and very adamant about sharing the variety of stories from the Caribbean. She's an independent journalist and has contributed to several major news outlets including NBCnews.com, Huffington Post, Caribbean Beat Magazine, and Voices of New York. Today, we talk about staying connected to the Caribbean through media, the importance of our stories, and much, much more. But first, let me share what I'm styling on and what I'm vibing to right now. So I'm kind of styling on, and I haven't gotten my hands on it yet, but Cardi B and Fashion Nova's collaboration. She dropped some visuals, a little video giving us a taste of what we can expect, but it hasn't dropped yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the collaboration with the brand is. She's definitely a supporter, as she always, well, not always. She's mentioned Fashion Nova in her, music, and she wears them regularly. So it's a great on-brand collaboration for both Cardi B and Fashion Nova. So that's well played, Cardi B, well played. What I'm vibing to right now is definitely Spice's Captured mixtape. She has a bunch of different songs that you probably have heard over the last few months. Under Fire, she'll have Yes Goody, and then some other stuff, Beauty and the Brain. I love that one. And my personal favorite is Body Right. I'm not even going to get into, what it's about. She also has the Black Hypocrisy song, of which she kind of released. That was the leading single off the mixtape, that she kind of colored her skin and made everybody think, that she had colored herself white, but she really wanted to talk about colorism. So I'll think Spice. So make sure you listen and just support the thing, because Spice, she had a queen. This mixtape definitely solidified that for me, in my mind, for her. So big up yourself, Spice. And now here is my conversation with Melissa Noel. So welcome, everyone. Today we have esteemed award-winning journalist. She doesn't like to say it, but she's an award-winning journalist. Melissa Noel, how are you?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me. And I see you called me out really, really quickly.
I have to. You know why? Because Caribbean people were too bashful. We need to just, say exactly you are an award winning. Now, let the people them know which award you win, because,
Oh my goodness! You put me on the spot right away. Okay, no.
I should say you can list a few of your awards.
All right. Well, the most recent one that I can think of, and one that's brought me a really great sense of pride, is the Salute to Excellence Award that I received from the National Association of Black Journalists for Best Single Story Feature nationally. And I'm so proud of that, because I won that award for a Caribbean story series I did about migration and its impact on Caribbean family, most particularly Caribbean children. So that brought me such a great sense of pride that it was a Caribbean story that got that kind of recognition. And it's a really underreported story, and something we don't often talk about in our community. So that one is it feels really, really great. And I also was honored by Guyanese Girls Rock with the Women of Influence Award earlier this year. So I was like, woo! And that meant a lot, because, it's one thing to get awards from, any award is something great. And for people to recognize your work, you feel amazing. But for it to come from an organization like that is doing such great work to highlight Guyanese women in their work and to mentor young girls, it felt like, okay, hey, one for the home team. I really appreciated that as well. So thanks for putting me on the spot there.
So let's back it up a little bit. As you can hear, she's Guyanese-American. What made you want to get into journalism kind of in the first place?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite questions, and it's because my grandmother is the reason I became a journalist. When my parents decided to settle in New Jersey, one of the things that I used to do all the time for my grandmother was go to the little West Indian market in the neighborhood, Joel's Market, that I still go to this day.
Mm-hmm. And big up Jules.
Right? Listen, they're Jamaican, love them to death. They always hold it down for the community.
Yes.
So I would go to Joel's Market and pick up the newspaper for her that she used to get when she was back home in Guyana. My grandmother lived with us for a number of years. And so I would go home and read it with her, and to see how excited that woman got to know, hey, what's going on in church, or what happened to this body, what was happening in the neighborhood. She would be so excited, and she still felt so connected to home. And I said from that point, hey, I want to keep people connected to the world around them. I want people to feel like they have a connection the way my grandmother did, and she was so happy. So I said I wanted to do that, and I stuck with that. So it's like, big up to Granny Laura. You're the reason why I'm a journalist today.
So in terms of just even being, able to keep people connected, media and journalism has kind of changed over the years, especially like how you're reporting, how frequently the stories are happening so quickly. What do you see as the connection that the diaspora will kind of play even in the future? In terms of remaining connected? Do you find that people are still reading newspapers, and is that still like an avenue that people are kind of using to remain connected to their home country?
Right. I love that question as well. And so most people are getting their news online these days. It's not that we're not using the print outlets or the newspapers, but we're not using them at the same rate. I know that in the most recent Pew Research study that I know of in 2016, we see that 9 out of 10 people, I believe it is, are getting their news online. So newspapers and print outlets, they definitely still matter, and we should definitely still support them. But because of the way that how we consume our news has changed so much, I think it's important for those outlets. And we've seen a change in that you have a lot of print outlets that have their digital components. We're seeing that we have to reach people in a different way. And the diaspora is huge in that. So many of us, want to do things like we go home and we work with people in different organizations. People start businesses. People work in the region and come back home. And then because we're such a global society now, we're making those links. We make sure we connect with our people, whether we're going to FET or we're going to work. So we make it a point to connect with each other in whatever space we're in. And I think it's a beautiful thing, because that's how our connections have grown and have gotten stronger. It's not hey, we're over here and you're over there. It's, hey, we're moving and working together, and let's keep connecting every time we cross paths. And I think that has been one of the most beautiful things. I could step onto any island right now or go to any diaspora community, let's say London or Toronto or something, and I feel like I have a family there. And that's what I think has been so exciting about what's changed in in our media, especially with social media. I feel like I have family everywhere.
Yeah, I definitely think, we're much more connected than we ever have been. Whereas, 10, 15 years ago, it was just different. So, and even inter-islands, being able to kind of see what's happening, from one island to another, you're kind of, it's at your hands. You can literally see what's happening in Barbados from Jamaica, or, vice versa, Trinidad to Guyana. And it's not so far-fetched. whereas, you know, you had to read the local, you know, news for each country in order to kind of get a grasp of, you know, what was happening there and how it was impacting you. I think a lot of people are kind of taking advantage of that. Do you find that in terms of having that connectivity, that as a people, we are much closer? You know, the water kind of divides us, but like being in diaspora spaces like New York, Toronto, London, it kind of feels more of like the melting pot of the Caribbean. It's not just one island versus the other, but more interconnectivity. Are you seeing that in some of the stories that you're covering?
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the biggest things. So we have seen some of the greatest stories we've seen have come out of people kind of gathering on social media, right, to begin with, and then meeting up in these spaces and they're on their respective islands, or being able to cross promote or work together to cause certain movements. And I think that has had a lot to do with how we're using that connectivity to affect change, whether it was the I believe it was the Life in Leggings movement, when we were talking about, you know, when it came to things like sexual assault or abuse, and you have women from all over the Caribbean who are, you know, you start something on social media, but then it spreads and you have people from all over the region, then all over the world who are a part of this, and you're conversing. You have people who are on conference calls, or we're saying this country is going to start its movement today. This country will be, you know, out and about in the streets today. And it's something that has become a point of not only reference, but a point of organization. And I think that's what has been so beautiful about how those things have happened. But at the same time, while we have some of those things happen in that collaboration, it's great. Sometimes I think that it can have its on the other side, make you feel a little bit more lax in terms of having to really get out there and make those face-to-face connections. So I always think it's important to have that balance. Like, you know, yes, I connect with certain people on social media, but if there's something happening where I can go and interface with those people, talk to them in person, you know, hear that laugh and that smile and really like engage, I make it a point to do that. So it's not like, hey, we're just sitting behind the computer and we think that is enough, you know, or the hashtag is enough. No, like we really need to see the people that we connect with. So I make it a point with everywhere that I travel. If there's people that I've connected with online before, that, hey, let's link up, let's meet up. It doesn't have to be anything formal. Let's just lime, you know, like that is really important. And I think some of the best connections I have, relationships I've formed, have come from doing things like that.
You know, I'm trying to think of how we met. Did we meet online?
Yes, we did. Social media, Instagram.
You know why? Because I've seen you so many times since our first interaction.
Exactly.
It was online. I think maybe I saw you in a post or something like that, and we kind of just started interacting from there. But I agree. I think it kind of definitely allows us to kind of remain connected. I you know, I'm not really good with like calling people or texting people, but if I see you in my Instagram feed, okay, hey girl, how you doing? You're looking good. You know,
everything all right?
Yes, yeah. You know, it kind of serves as that kind of reminder. And you know, you connect with so many people now, and you can find, you know, your own little community that you know, to converse with and have dialogue. And you know, you don't always, especially I think for people who don't live in high traffic cities like New York, that's even more important.
Right.
Because they don't have, you know, all the events that we have access to. And, you know, if you're living like in the Midwest or like in some place, and now you see, you know, communities in like Texas, and, you know, my friend, she just moved to Texas, and she's like, you have to come visit. They have this dance hall party on Sundays and we have to go. And I'm just like, well, I kind of assume that there are Caribbean people elsewhere, but it's just not, you know, top of mind when you know, especially living in New York, you know, you don't really kind of venture out unless you kind of have that friend that kind of brings you and kind of exposes you to that culture outside of the big
metropolitan cities. Yeah. And sometimes I find myself saying, like, you have other places are like Charlotte, North Carolina, you mentioned Texas, and then you have these other pockets popping up. And I always have to say to myself, well, yeah, duh, we're everywhere.
Yes. Everywhere.
And I need to visit folks. So I'm going to add that to my list.
Texas? I'll let you know exactly where it is, because I have no idea. I'll let you know. So in terms of, you do a lot of like coverages on cultural identity stories and things like, what kind of draws you to that? Is it like a personal, or it's just something that kind of you're passionate about?
I think it's a mixture of both. Like for me, it's so important for me to help viewers or people who read or see my story to understand the complexity, the beauty and the complexity of Caribbean people. So I'm always really drawn to those stories of identity and culture, because I feel like it is a really great way to show people our complexity, our diversity, that there's so much beyond what people know, by just sharing a little bit about who we are. And then for them to learn something new and say, hey, I didn't know that about the region, or I didn't know that about this country, then I feel like I've done my job. And then I just love us. So it never feels like work for me. It feels really, I feel a sense of pride when I get to tell our stories for places like NBC News, HuffPost, and these major outlets on television, for major news network affiliates. It's a great source of pride for me, because I feel like I'm doing a service for our people, and I feel like I'm doing something for myself too, because I am keeping our stories in people's minds, and I think that is that's a responsibility I have as a Caribbean American. Yeah,
I think, especially when it comes to mainstream, I feel like we get picked up when it's a hurricane story, and I know you've done a lot of coverage recently on that, and we can kind of talk about that as well. But it's either music related or weather related.
Or if there's crimes,
or significant crimes. So I think, how is it pitching stories that are outside of that normal news cycle, and what is the response that you get in terms of being a catalyst for the region, the stories that come from the region outside of the norm?
So what you actually mentioned about only seeing our stories when it was like, weather, crime, or music is actually why I decided to specifically focus on the Caribbean region and pretty much carve out this niche for myself. Some of the things that happened where some days I would just get upset and say, oh my goodness, there's such, it pitch a really great story and it would get turned down. And then 2 weeks later, there's a hurricane and everybody's all over it. And I would always post the question, well, why is that? Like, that story was a great story, but now this gives you, I guess this will give you more eyes on the TV. So you want this instead, but you're not giving that same level of interest to something that's positive. And yes, both, of course, hurricanes need coverage, but what else? So that's why I became a freelance reporter in the first place, because I wanted to see my people in more ways than one. I wanted to show that complexity, that diversity. We have diverse issues and other great stories. And two, unfortunately, newsrooms there are no Caribbean correspondent roles in American newsrooms, a mainstream, none. So when it came to, and you have a few newspapers that might have a correspondent here or there. But other than that, you look at network news and you look at the major outlets, that just doesn't exist. And I decided that I was going to create it for myself. Wasn't really sure how to do it, but I knew that becoming a freelancer was going to be the best way, because then I could pitch to multiple places at one time. I could go to different places at once, and then I wasn't tied down to just one particular outlet. And also to build that brand for myself. It wasn't easy. I'll tell you, the first 2 years I was pitching stories, and I got turned down a lot before I got yeses. One of the places that was on board from day one was Voices of New York. They're a local community and ethnic media outlet in the city. And they allowed me to really I said, look, you don't have a lot of Caribbean coverage here, original reporting. I'd like to help you do that. And they let me start. And then once I started pitching some of the network news outlets, I got a bunch of no's, but then it went from no to yes, go ahead, but you have to pay your own way. Like, we're not going to, we have no budget for this. So I often would go to I would often buy a plane ticket out of my own little pocket and, stay with a friend, a cousin, a college friend, an auntie, somebody, brother, sister, cousin, something. I just made it work for myself because I knew that if I put in the time and made the sacrifices, it would pay off, but it was gonna take me that time. So it wasn't easy. I spent a lot of my own money. And there were days, like, freelancing is not glamorous. So there are days, you fell behind on the bills and, things weren't always the best. And I'm really, I like to be forthcoming about that. I don't think, for me, it's not a source of shame or anything like that. It's just really being real about some of the aspects of being a freelancer. A lot of times you don't get paid on time, or you don't get paid for 30 to 60 days past, when you actually turned in the work. And, of course, bills are every day, so that doesn't stop them from coming. But I stuck with it because I knew that if I did, people would see the value. And that is what happened. About 2 years in, I was able to connect with the founding editor of NBCBLK.com, NBC Black, Amber Payne. And she really believed in making sure that underreported stories about Black communities, not just here in the States, but, throughout the world, were told. And when I told her about my interests and what I really wanted to do, she gave me a platform at NBC News, unlike anything I have had, to tell those stories. And that was about 3.5 years ago that I was able to start doing that. So it really gave me the opportunity to do that. And at the same time, I began doing television work for One Caribbean Television and their, CBS, ABC affiliates in the Caribbean. So it started to come together, but it definitely took a lot of time and sacrifice, and just knowing that I had to stick with it to see the reward, quote unquote, at the end.
That's amazing in terms of, I think that's very inspirational, because a lot of times people think, we definitely, everyone sees the edited version.
Oh, yes.
They don't see what all that has happened behind the scenes, all the no's that you have gotten over the years that transpired into a yes. And I think that that's very telling of you and your career, and just looking forward to seeing what else you have coming. And I know you kind of mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that you're working with children. Tell me about, is it related to like journalism, or what do you think that this next level of Caribbean journalism from a region and a diaspora perspective, what does that look or feel like? Is there a lot of people lining up to do things that are similar, or is it just kind of like you kind of have pockets?
So, well, I think there's a few things for me. So I am, now that I am one of the go-to persons for Caribbean coverage and content. And I'm really proud of the fact that I have been able to carve out this Caribbean correspondent niche, in addition to doing, and reporting on other things happening nationally as well as internationally. But I'm really proud of this in particular. And I would say for me, the next level is, I kind of think about it as my 3 components. One being, continuing to expand my reporting work in the region and diaspora, both on television and digitally. That's a really important part for me. So I'm going to be moving into the TV space a lot more, and I look forward to sharing more about that when I can. Mm-hmm. But towards the end of the year, start of next year, you'll definitely be seeing more of me and on the television side, which I'm really excited about. The next part for me is education. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the reason why I was working with children. One of the ways that I've been able to get some of my bigger projects done in the Caribbean region is through grant and fellowship funding. Mm-hmm. And I worked with a number of places in order to do that, applying for grants and fellowships. And they've been instrumental in helping me to get the kinds of stories about the region done and providing those resources. So I've had the opportunity to work with the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. They have an education program that goes into schools across the country, but in particular, I worked with students in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. Mm-hmm. And I was able to go into the classroom and talk to them about underreported stories and an underreported region when it comes to the news. So I got to talk about the Caribbean and how that is an underreported region in the news, and talk to them about the story series I did on barrel children in the Caribbean and that impact of migration, and talk to them about immigration, migration, what that means, how people sacrifice for their families, Caribbean culture. And, I had students from 4th grade all the way to, senior year in high school. I think I did probably 10 or 12 classes. It was a beautiful thing. So I want to continue to do things like that. And not only that, when it comes to education, every time I go to the Caribbean, I make it a point to work with students, teach a class, work with people who want to be in media, because we have so much talent, but often the resources aren't there. So I'm definitely going to be expanding upon education when it comes to people who want to be in the media industry from our region, because I know that sometimes I don't want lack of resources to be a barrier. So I'm hoping to work with organizations like Pulitzer and others to be able to bring some of that training to the region and make it a regular thing. And the third part of what I want to do, I've learned a lot more about the business side of our media industry, is to make sure that I position myself to be in some decision-making spaces, as a content creator and as a producer, so that we see more of us and that there's more diversity. So it's like my little 3-prong plan for growing, not just as a journalist, but as somebody who is a Caribbean influencer or change maker, period. I think that's more important than just saying, oh, here's my story. I think you have to do and think bigger than that and do more outside of your role.
That is a great place to end, but I have one more question.
Okay.
These are light. So, but I think you have me thinking about so many things, and everything that you're doing and saying is so amazing. And of course, I'm always here to support in any way that I can.
Thank you.
I have to know, what are you styling on? What are you vibing to? I need some, what you're listening to, where you're shopping, them something there.
This is, and I don't get this question a lot. So I like that. I am such a soca fanatic. I think I scare people on the train or plane every single day, because I'm always
so you're listening to soca at disrespectful levels on the train. Okay.
You got me. Okay.
You probably don't even know because you're so busy rocking out.
Right now, I am really bumping to. I love Nyla Blackman. I think her not only her voice and her sound are so unique, but her style. And I take a lot of my nods for style from some of our Caribbean women that I see, because they're just so amazing. I love my Nyla Blackman. I love Patrice Roberts. She's like a style icon for me. I'm always watching not just the songs, but the style. My girl Spice is always coming and hitting us hard. So I will say I love her. I absolutely love her. So I'm listening to that. And I'm really, really excited about some of the 2019 releases for Carnival. We're starting to hear some things now.
Yes.
And I'm a big small island, like soca girl. So it's stuff from like St. Lucia and St. Vincent and all those places.
Yeah.
I'm always checking it out. And then when it comes to like my style, I feel like, this is interesting. I have really, some of the things you have posted about like 10 Caribbean designers you should check out, or, you know, some of the people I see online, I'll look at those things and I'll say, I want this kind of look today. Or, oh, when I'm working in Jamaica, or I'm working in St. Vincent, I want that kind of look. And I'll kind of model it after things I see, and then I'll also support a lot of Caribbean designers, but I like bold prints, colorful outfits. I love dresses. I love big chunky jewelry, all those things. I like to make a statement, especially now that I'm moving into the TV space. I want people to know that this is Caribbean style they're seeing. So yeah, shout out to all the designers who I'll probably be hitting up very soon.
Well, we can't wait to see. I love what you have coming up, and thank you so much for just sharing your journey, sharing your story, as well as just connecting with us, and definitely looking forward to having you back.
Oh yes, most definitely, because this was a nice little lime to just chat with you. This was good.
Let me tell you, you're not for worry about nothing.
You know, you had me a little afraid. I was like,
no.
This was good.
Well, thanks again, and have a good day.
Yes, you too.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Style and Vibes podcast. If you like what you hear, and I know you do, share it with your friends and family. If you want more, make sure you visit styleandvibes.com and follow us on our social channels, Twitter and Instagram @Style and Vibes. Until next time, Leah Tommy Peeps.